Welcome to our Getting Started with Atom and DOMA training. We are also going to be covering LGL Math Edge today. Today we're going to start with introductions, a little bit about our company, and then get to know Atom, DOMA, and Math Edge. After that, we will navigate Active Pulse Math and look at some of our feature reports. From there, we'll move on to enrolling students in LGL Math Edge and how to monitor them as they're working through the program. At the end, we'll have time for questions and comments, which you can go ahead and send to help@letsgolearn.com. So Let's Go Learn is an educational technology company with a focus on personalized instruction using deep data. So we want to make sure that your students have the instruction that they need, either through individualized, personalized instruction or through personalized instruction that you have created for them using our data. So a little bit about Let's Go Learn. Let's Go Learn's assessments were designed by educators specifically to help educators inform their instruction. Our assessments are criterion referenced, and that means that we are looking for specific skills in a specific scope and sequence so that we can help you know where to tailor your instruction for that student. Typically, other assessments may be norm referenced, which means they're telling you if your student is below, at, or above grade level in comparison to other students. But we're not looking to compare your students to other students. We want you to compare your students to themselves to see their growth and use that to inform your instruction. As well, benchmark assessments will only tell you if a student is meeting their grade level expectations. That's great if they are, but if they aren't, or if they're in the below grade level area for norm referenced assessment, that doesn't tell you what they need, what instruction you need to help them. So what we want to do is give you a true diagnostic assessment that tells you whether or not a student is struggling, and if they are, why are they struggling? What is holding them back? And if they're doing well, where are their successes? You know, what can you use to help them with the areas they're struggling with, or what skills do they know that can be of service to them? So, and of course, I'm going to say it over and over and over again, our diagnostics are meant to guide instruction. So how are you going to guide that instruction? Well, we want to give you data that allows you to group students in the classroom, helps you to create IEPs for them, and allows you to do blended learning. Our goal is to find the student's zone of proximal learning. We want to find the exact place where they're ready to learn. And so our data is given in grade level scores. It's actionable. It allows you to actually use the data and gives you a scope and sequence of what to do with that data and what you need to teach the student what they need to learn. And of course, we also have our personalized automated instruction, giving you the data you need to create your own interventions. So this is how we do it. We start off with a diagnostic assessment. So our diagnostic assessments for math are Atom and DOMA. We have you start with that, and then you get a full scope and sequence, a full understanding of where the student is in math, and you use that to inform your instruction. For whole class instruction, you can help scaffold students, or you can also use LGL Edge to help them before a lesson or after a lesson. You also can use small groups. Even with distance learning, you can create small groups and use breakout rooms to help the students work together. And you can use Edge in these breakout rooms, and you can also use new materials that you already have to help these small groups with particular areas of need. And then we also give you what you need for personalized learning. So you can use Edge here, especially using the Edge for students' personalized path, as well as assigning specific lessons. So you can assign specific lessons to the whole class, to a small group, or to individual students. And as your instruction goes, you're going to, of course, be teaching the grade level material, but you want to make sure that you're using the data to understand whether or not students are ready for that grade level instruction, and if they're not, to give them the tools that they need to access that instruction. After instruction, we definitely want to make sure that you're progress monitoring. So we have our formative skills assessments to allow you to assess just particular things that you've recently taught. But you also can progress monitor looking at the students' EDGE lesson scores to see how they're doing in particular areas. As you progress monitor, you're going to use that information to inform your next set of instruction. And then we also recommend that you give another diagnostic assessment partway through the year. So you give another full diagnostic to see how students have progressed. You want to see what gains they've made. And then you use that information to once again guide your instruction. So typically an assessment will give you a generic score for numbers and operations, or a generic score in geometry, or a generic score in one particular area. That's useful to a point. That can tell you, okay, does this student need intervention? But it doesn't tell you what kind of intervention they need, and it won't tell you their exact levels in each area. So if you get a generic score saying like, okay, this student is at third grade level in numbers and operations, that misses some important factors. For this student, for example, this student actually is doing pretty well in multiplication, but really struggling in fractions. So if we just say, oh, the student's at a third grade level, we've missed that they're really far behind in fractions, but they're actually at a fourth grade level in multiplication. And sure, they're in at a third grade level for addition, so it hits the nail on the head there. But, and subtraction kind of, okay, that's around the right area, but it doesn't give you the granular detail that our assessments give. So let's dive into ADAM. ADAM is our Adaptive Diagnostic Assessment in Mathematics. Now, ADAM covers basically all of your foundational skills from kindergarten all the way through the end of 7th grade. And in fact, it's actually very useful for understanding 8th grade students as well, since many of the topics covered in 8th grade math are also covered with the ADAM assessment. It is aligned to Common Core standards. I will talk about that more later. We are not a Common Core assessment, but we are aligned to the Common Core. As well, if you are teaching in a state that does not use Common Core, we do have alignments to other sets of standards as well. And like I mentioned, we're a criterion reference assessment, so we're looking at specific skills. And then we also, one of the features for ADAM is that we include oral reading of a lot of the items to help reduce the issue of reading being an effect on their score. We have some great reports that you have available immediately after completing the assessment. And then we have some reports that need to load up, but they're also really useful as well. So we'll be covering some of these reports, kind of immediate reports, during the training. However, these after reports, we will not get into those during this training. But if you want a follow-up training, let your admin know and we can go into those reports. So I'm just going to go real quick through some of these reports. We have a detail or progress report that really pinpoints the student's next step. And like I said, I will go into these reports in more detail. We have a great report for writing IEPs that tells the students' present levels. It also gives their next step instructional skills. And I will go into how to access this report. We have an instructional placement report that breaks your students into groups based on what their next step for learning is. We have a standards report that lets you know what skills students need scaffolding in before you do a whole class lesson when you're working on a particular standard. Then we have our DOMA Pre-Algebra. This is for your higher level students, your students who have mastered the foundational skills, and you want to see where they are at in pre-algebra and also their basic math skills. So this does have a basic math skills portion as well as a pre-algebra specific section. So we cover 14 subtests. The first 5 are the basic math skills, and then the next 9 are the pre-algebra skills. We have pre-screening, so for students who are doing really well, they actually don't take very long on this assessment. They can bypass certain subtests if they do well on the pre-screening. Now, we do also have a math facts section in this, but it's based on a student's performance. So if they're struggling, they will be assessed in math facts as well as reading comprehension to see if that's affecting their scores. We are also criterion based in our DOMA pre-algebra assessment. We do recommend 45 minutes to 60 minutes to take the pre-algebra assessment. And I didn't mention this before, but ADAM is a very, very detailed assessment. So we do recommend that you allot a longer time for taking that assessment. So I do recommend that you break down both of these assessments into half-hour sections. And so I recommend that you allow 2 days for DOMA and 2 to 4 days for ADAM. We have a detailed report as well for pre-algebra, and we'll go into this, of course, in more detail later. And then we have Math Edge. Math Edge is our personalized instruction for math. So Math Edge allows you to take their ADAM or pre-algebra assessment and assign lessons that are very targeted to the student's actual needs, starting with their lowest instructional need. We want to make sure that we're hitting their zone of proximal development. It's very effective, and we want to make sure that students are retaining the information. We're using their assessment to give them the lessons that they need, and it's done automatically. So when a student finishes the assessment, you'll go ahead and enroll them. You don't have to pick out the lessons are picked out for them. And these are lessons that aren't too easy, aren't too hard, are right at the point of where the student needs. We go ahead and use really effective teaching methods. One thing at the middle school and high school level that I always want to be clear with is that how you present this to the students really affects how they view it. We use songs, animations, graphics. It really gets in the student's head, and it's effective. It really helps them learn. Those songs, kind of go on repeat as they're working in problems outside of Edge. They start to think about the songs. It helps the students actually retain the information. We sometimes think, songs, graphics, that's for younger students. But in fact, this is effective with adults. LGL Edge has won awards for adult education. And think about how many adults, really enjoy sort of those same fun activities that help you not just learn, but entertain you. It doesn't have to be dry and boring to be effective with older students. So we want to make sure that you're presenting it to your students as something that's actually going to help them and make it more interesting instead of saying, this is for younger students. We have the same engaging songs and graphics for first grade all the way through algebra and pre-algebra. So it doesn't matter what level they're at, we really want to engage their interest. We also allow you to give lessons that are specific to what you are teaching. So we do have that personalized learning path that is there for students to really fill in their gaps. It makes classroom instruction so much more attainable for them. They can really access that information that you're sharing with them when they have the foundational skills that they need, but also they can access that grade level content or specifically to what you are teaching. You can assign them lessons to help them have some kind of pre-information based on your teaching so that they can understand what you're showing them because they have some prior knowledge. We do want to make sure that students retain this information. We don't want to just have them going through and clicking and getting the scores right, and then they don't remember anything that they learned. So like I said, the songs help with retention, but also we give them opportunities for review. They do have to master each section before they go on. And one of my favorite things is that we give actual corrective feedback. So when they answer a question wrong, it shows them how to do it correctly and gives them another opportunity to try again. It's important when you're using Edge with your class that you make sure that you communicate your expectations for them. Let the students know that Edge is meant to address their individual needs. Their lessons are going to be different than any other student. It's going to be what they need, not what their neighbor needs, not what their friend needs, but it's going to be what they need to be successful in math. And it's really important to set goals, establish expectations. How many lessons should they be completing each week? For students that are further behind, you may be having them complete more lessons. Now, these lessons aren't going to take as long as students who are, further ahead. So you can kind of change those goals as the students are working through the lessons. You may be having a student complete more lessons at the beginning when those lessons are a little bit easier. And then as the lessons get harder and harder, that number of lessons expected may change. As well, you want to set guidelines with them. When should they finish a lesson completely, or when should they restart it if they're struggling? So I always recommend that a student complete a lesson, even if they're not going to pass it, they complete it the first time they take it, so that you know where they're at. You know that they're struggling. If they go ahead and they start a lesson and they click out every time they get something wrong, you don't know, are they struggling? Would they not pass it if they finished it? Or would they actually pass it? They only would have gotten one or two wrong, and they would have done just fine, but they're using up their time just trying to get the best score possible. So I really encourage that you use the completed lessons as your goals as opposed to using the average scores, so that students don't feel penalized for finishing a lesson that they aren't going to pass. And then go ahead and schedule time to review. That you want them to finish their lesson, move on to the next one, but give them a chance to go back and review their lessons that they didn't do as well on. Maybe they passed them, but they didn't get a perfect score. You can go ahead and schedule time that they can review and increase their score. And of course, review helps them to really understand that information and retain it. So if you are, in remote learning, one of the things is, how do you use this for remote learning? We recommend 3 to 6 lessons a week. Of course, you do have to set the goals based on your particular students, but you can have students use LGL Math Edge on their own during their own time, during school time that you're not there specifically with them. That's a great time to use their path. But then you can also use the whiteboard. So the whiteboard allows you to show any lesson to your class or to review that lesson on your own. But you can use that just to show a particular lesson as an opening activity, or you can assign particular lessons for students to complete either before the lesson that you're giving or after a particular topic. And then you can even have students work together in small groups in breakout rooms so that they can, all be working on the same lesson under assignments, but they're not doing the same questions, but they can help each other to work through the program. I'll go over in detail within an account how to enroll the students, and I will cover monitoring each student and what each of their particular sections of the monitoring page look like and what they represent. So you can really view in, though, on students and see their exact usage every time they've logged in, every time they've clicked on a lesson. You can see all of those details. And you can track their lessons, see their scores, see how many times they've played a lesson. We really have a lot of tools for monitoring the students. And students actually do see their own progress as they work through. They earn bronze, silver, and gold badges. A bronze badge means that they passed the lesson and they have an accuracy of 75% to 89%. And what that means is that in order for the lesson to end, they have to earn 100 points. But once that 100 points is earned, their accuracy during that process is their score. Like I said, bronze is 75% to 89%. Silver is 90 to 94%, and gold is 95% or above. Students can go back, like I said, and review their silver and bronze lessons, but their gold lessons, we block them from reviewing because we want to make sure that they are progressing instead of just redoing the lessons they've already done. So I recommend when you're setting goals that you set those goals for new lessons, except for on review weeks. But you want them to be progressing to new lessons, not just repeating lessons they've already done. And students can even view their progress. They can see, they can click in and they can see every time that they've used it and view how much they've learned, how much time they've spent on the program, how many lessons they've completed, and how they scored on each of their lessons. I'm going to actually go into an account and show you the basics of managing your account, getting to know the scores and reports, and really understanding what you're looking at when you're working with Adam and DOMA Pre-Algebra. But if you do have questions, if you have any technical questions, you can go ahead and reach out to help@letsgolearn.com. So if you have technical questions, they'll answer them. If you have kind of broader questions about the program, you can reach out to your customer success specialist, or you can reach out to help and they will forward it along to the appropriate person. What we're going to do next is we're going to log into an account. And if you're brand new, I'm going to show you exactly how to log in. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to letsgolearn.com. And then you're going to come up here to where it says login. Click on login, and this will take you to the login page. Now, you may have Clever with your account. You can either log in through the Clever site or through your admin, however your district has it set up, or you could click in login with Clever here. Another option is to log in with Google. If you are signed in on your browser, on Chrome, to your Google account, you actually only need to log in once using your credentials, and then from then on, when you click on login with Google, it will log you in automatically. But you do need to have your login credentials. So your username is typically your email address, and you'll get your password and then your school code. Your school code that is specific to your district. So I'm going to be using a demo account. I'm, signing in my school code. I'll type that in. One thing to be really clear on is everything here is lowercase. It's case sensitive, so make sure you have everything lowercase. If you're having trouble logging in, check all of those. Check to make sure you have periods in the right places instead of commas, or everything's spelled correctly, and that everything is lowercase. If you don't know your password, you can go ahead and click on Forgot Login. And what you do here is you'll enter your email address. If you have an account at that email address, it will send you a link to change your password. One thing to be careful of, if you do change your password, is that your admin can see what your password is. So don't put anything too sensitive. You do want to make it secure, but you don't want to put anything that you use as a password for any other site. So go ahead and click on Login. And this takes you to your account. So you have your home page. And here we have your district message. So for your district, you'll see, any announcements. Maybe you'll see what your testing windows are. You might have some additional contact information, but your district message will be here. And then our Let's Go Learn announcements will be below it. And kind of keep an eye out here for any updates that might be happening. As well, we have on the top right, we have help. This brings you to request support. If you have any technical issues, you can go ahead and fill out request support. And knowledge base brings you to our knowledge base that has a lot of help articles that can give you support that you need. These two things are actually also available here over on the left-hand side. Request support, that's the fastest way to get technical help. If you have any questions about issues that you might have, go ahead and fill that out. That will take you directly to a help ticket. And like I said, fastest way to get help. Knowledge base is right here. As well, we have a great video library. This gives you basically everything you need to get started. Anything you might miss from this training, or there's something that's not covered, we have this video library. And if you click on there, that takes us to our training and PD site. We have the Getting Started Basics, information about Edge. We have great resources for parents, We have recommendations in our managing distance learning. We have recommendations for proctoring the assessment over Zoom. So we have a distance learning page that helps you to get recommendations on how to proctor virtually and how to, use our program in a distance learning model. As well, we have student resources. This is really helpful for goal setting. We have, setting goals for ELA and for math. So that's, of course, our focus today. And we have this really excellent exit ticket if students need extra help staying focused on their lessons, or if you want some extra details on making sure that you're tracking their lessons and that they're staying focused and that they're really engaged. I recommend this exit ticket. This student self-assessment is typically for younger students. So for the older students, I recommend the goal setting math and the LGL exit ticket. I'm going to come back. We also have the on-demand courses. So if you want to get credit for having completed these videos, we do have the on-demand courses available for you. And that's a great way to stay engaged with the material. It asks questions and gives you a certificate at the end. I do want to point out, actually, in the PD site, over here we have the test admin scripts, but if you are proctoring remotely, we also have a slide deck that you can use, and it has the information from those admin scripts kind of worked into the slide deck. So we have this teacher admin script, so you make sure that the students know what they need and know what to expect on the assessments. And then we have, that student resources page that I was talking about. We have a link directly to that here. And that link to those remote assessment guides are right here. So you don't have to go searching for them on the PD page. You can actually click right here for that. So let's get into a little bit about your account. The first thing you're going to do is go to class. Your students should already be loaded into your class. If you have an integration system that connects to your student information system, your students should automatically be updated here. If your district or your school did do an individual upload, you may need to move students around when they leave your class or they come into your class. And the way that you're going to do that is you're going to use the Move Student tool. Do not do Add New Student. This is for students that are completely new to your district or your account. And so we actually don't want you really adding new students unless you are an admin, because we want to make sure everything is put in correctly. So Move Student will move a student into your class. It won't actually move a student out of their previous classes. So a student can be in more than one class. I do recommend if you are removing a student, you actually do that here under Manage, and you go into Student Roster. And there you'll see your students in their classes. And you can click on that class and delete it and remove them from that class. I don't recommend deleting a student directly from the class tab, because that can have the risk of deactivating a student. So the other things that you can see here, you can add a class. So if you want to create some smaller groups to look at students that way, you can do that. If you need to add the class yourself, or you don't have a roster in your student information system, and you need to create your own classes, you can go ahead and add class and then use the Move Student tool to move your students in. As well, on this page, you can actually log in as a student. You need to see what they're seeing. If a student comes to you and says, oh, I'm having trouble with this particular situation in my account, you can log in using Begin. As well, you can share their login information using either Show Login Info, so this tells you their login, their password, their school code, or you can print login list, and I recommend the card format. If they're in person, you can go ahead and print this out for them, but if they're not, what you can do is you can take a screenshot of this and send it to them. So now, the other thing that I want to point out on this page is this activity section. You can go ahead and see when was the last time this student logged in. You want to know, are they logging in when they're supposed to be? Are they logged in when they say they are? If you're proctoring the assessment and they're not logged in, then you want to definitely keep an eye on that. So this allows you to see the last time your students logged in. Next, I want to go over how to queue up your students for the assessment. So you have all your students here, you're ready for them to take the assessment. So in order to do that, you're going to click on Test Queue. Typically, you can queue up all your students at once using the Manage Class Queue button. So if I click on Manage Class Queue, this will allow me to queue up a comprehensive diagnostic for the whole class. So I can go ahead and select my assessment. So let's say I want to queue up my entire class. I've got an 8th grade class looking to go into integrated math next year, and I want to see if they're ready. I can use DOMA Pre-Algebra, and I can click on that, and I queue up the whole class. So now my whole class has been queued up for DOMA Pre-Algebra. You're going to use Pre-Algebra for your students that are more advanced. For your students that really are still working on their foundational skills, we want to make sure that they're using ADAM. So you could queue up the class for ADAM. But let's say you have a student working kind of below grade level, they have an IEP, and you need to set their beginning assessment a little bit lower because we are adaptive, but we start at the student's grade level. So if a student is really far behind, we want to make sure that they're not having to work through all that higher level material and getting frustrated. And so we allow you to change to the appropriate level. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to you. I'll click there. I can see what a student has been queued up for by hovering over this test queues. Okay, so I'm going to pick Kendall. I'm going to click on Add Edit for Kendall. And Kendall is already queued up for Adam, but has not started. So I'm going to unqueue because I want to make sure that I'm queuing Kendall at the appropriate level. So I'm going to unqueue Kendall, and then I'm going to pick this comprehensive diagnostic. I'm going to pick Adam. And now I'm going to do the optional override grade. So in this scenario, let's say that Kendall is in 7th grade, but has an IEP that indicates that their actual functional level, their present level, they are working at 4th grade. So I'm going to go ahead and click on 4th grade, and I'm going to queue Kendall up. But now let's say I want to go ahead, I have Kendall queued up for 4th grade, and after reviewing Kendall's scores, I can see that they're at the 4th grade level, but I actually want to assess Kendall in a particular area that wasn't covered in the full diagnostic because Kendall didn't, get to that point in the assessment. I can actually go ahead and do a sub-test diagnostic. If your district has formative assessments on their account, we do have sub-test diagnostics that allow you to just assess one particular skill or one particular concept. So we have, for skills and concepts, that's like really detailed, but if you want to kind of look at a sub-test, kind of a broader concept, we have that here in our sub-test diagnostic. So I go ahead and use the filter search, and let's say I want to just focus on fractions. So I've given an assessment and I want to focus on fractions. I can go ahead and search for fractions. And what I'll see is there's actually 2 fraction subtests. If it has the number in front of it, that indicates that that's part of the pre-algebra assessment. So if I had given DOMA pre-algebra and I wanted to reassess fractions, then I would go ahead and queue up for this. But for Kendall, I'm going back. I've taught fractions for a little while, and I want to see if there's improvement. I'm going to use the Adam fraction subtest. So that's the one without the numbers in front. And I'm going to go ahead and queue Kendall up for that subtest. And I'll see that down here that Kendall is queued for particular subtests. As well, if I wanted to do a skills or concept quiz, just wanted to assess a particular fractions concept, I could go into filter search. Once again, I can select math here. I could look by grade or I could search by concept. So let's say I want to do fractions. Again, this shows me all of the fractions concepts, and I can even search within these results. I can even narrow it down further. Let's say I'm doing something with adding. So I can look, I want particularly to assess fractions adding unlike denominators. So I can go ahead and queue up a skills quiz just for that. And then I can look down and I can see, okay, so I've queued up this student for that particular skills quiz. Once the students are queued up, I can go ahead and go to test queue. I can see, like I said, what the student is queued up for. I can also see if students are in progress. So I can see, that justice is in progress on Adam. I can see if students are queued or in progress. As well, if I want to look into the student's account, this is another place where I can access logging into the students. So once your students are all queued for the assessment, you actually can start tracking their progress as soon as they start taking the assessment. You're going to track the student progress in scores and reports. If you did assign a subtest or a skills quiz, you can find that here in skills and subtest. However, I'm not going to cover that in today's training. If we want to do a further training, go ahead and contact your admin, and we can do a training to really cover these details about formative. But instead, where I'm going to focus is active pulse math. So that really pulls in all of their assessment data. So it does pull in those skills and subtest quizzes into one place, as well as the comprehensive diagnostic. So I'm going to go ahead and click on active pulse math. And here I can see, when the student last assessed, and this will come up if the student has finished the assessment. But as soon as the student starts, they're going to start calculating. Now, if a student does not have an assessment from after June of this year, if they did not take any assessments since June, you're going to see NTs. If a student already has an assessment, since we did our big update in June, they will have scores here. If they have not, like I said, if they have not taken an assessment since June, as they take the assessment, their scores are going to slowly start to calculate here. I do not recommend looking at these scores on this page until the student has finished their assessment, until this last assessed comes up with an actual date here. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to kind of monitor as they're working through by going up here to these tabs that show each of the strands. So we're going to start in numbers and operations because that's where the assessment starts. So we click on numbers and operations, and here you can see their scores start to populate. So as soon as they've taken this first section, numbers, they'll get a score here and you'll be able to see the data. As they take each subtest, their scores will populate in here. So you can see them progressing through the assessment. A couple of things about this page. First, you see these green scores. These green scores indicate that a student has mastered this section of the assessment. These scores will populate for Adam and for DOMA pre-algebra. So with Adam, they're going to have subtests. Most of these subtests will go in order. For pre-algebra, it actually, which subtests have scores is a little bit different. It starts with their basic math skills and it moves through. So if a student takes both, those scores will both be shown here with the highest level of mastery being what's shown. So like I said, these green scores indicate that a student has mastered this section. If they have mastered this section and that section is below their grade level, they actually will not get that section again. We indicate that they've mastered it, and the next time they take the assessment, they won't have to take that subtest. Red scores, however, are a little bit different. Red scores indicate that the student has no mastery in that concept. So for example, ratios and proportions, that's a concept that starts at 6th grade. This student was given the chance to try it, but they didn't show any mastery, meaning that they didn't get the first concept. And so that's where that red score shows. We don't want to put a 0 there. Let's say you have a 6th grade student and they haven't been exposed to exponents yet. We don't want you to think that they are at a 0. Instead, that's a 7th grade skill. And so they're just at below 7th grade. So that's what the red scores indicate here. The bold scores indicate that that score is below grade level, but they do have some mastery. And then you have your, non-bold scores, not green, not red, not bold. Those scores just indicate that the student is within grade level or maybe above, but haven't mastered that section. So that's what the scores indicate. They are grade level scores. But we want to get into more detail is, what does that grade level mean? We have our instructional placement report that actually breaks down the scope and sequence. What I recommend doing is, if you want to see, well, where are my students as a group? You can go ahead and go up to instructional placement. And if I want to look at, let's say I want to look at comparing and ordering. So I can go up to where it says num and drop down to comparing and ordering. I click on that and I click on instructional placement. And this groups my students. So I can see that I have 2 students that are able to compare single digits. What's below them is what they're able to do. And what's above them is their next step. So I know that these 2 students both need to work on comparing 2-digit numbers using the appropriate symbols. I can go ahead and work with these students on that concept. I can also see that I have 2 students who have mastered this subtest, and I have another student whose next step is comparing money amounts. And I can go back, and so that is available. As soon as a student finishes that subtest, that instructional placement report is available for them in that subtest. Now, if a student has already taken the assessment before, then the subsequent subtests they haven't finished yet in the assessment, in their new assessment, their scores will remain. So one thing is that we want to make sure we have really accurate data, because if somebody is assisting your student, you're going to get data for that person, not for your student. And the data that's here sticks with the highest level of achievement. We have, it's not uncommon for a student to kind of bomb an assessment because they weren't putting in effort. And we don't want to kind of wipe out their achievements because they're having a bad day. So what we do is we track their highest level of achievement here. But if the assessment is not accurate, then this data will not be accurate and will stay inaccurate if the student has gotten assistance. So it's really, really important that when you are proctoring the assessment, or if you're not proctoring it and they're doing it on their own at home, that they not reach out for additional assistance. We don't want parents or caregivers to be coaching them as they're taking the assessment, because what will end up happening is they'll get material that's too difficult for them. You'll teach them at a level that they're not ready for. And we want to know what they know, and we want to know what they don't know. So in order to know what they know, we've got to get them to the point where they don't know something. So if a student is struggling, I always recommend they can click on the I don't know button if the material allows for it to show up. If it's an above grade level skill, the I don't know button will appear. If they don't know material and there isn't an I don't know button, they can actually go ahead and guess. It's not going to give them a false high score if they randomly guess right, because we actually assess them in sets. So that set of questions needs a mastery level, not just one right answer to move them on to the next section. I do recommend that you do let your students know that they should guess if they don't understand the concept, but they should give it their best go if they have a relative idea of what's going on. Once everybody in the class has finished their assessments, we actually have the standards report that I want to get into. So this standards report, if I click on there, I can choose a standard. So if I'm going to be teaching a standard to the whole class, in this class, they're not a middle school class or a high school class. So I'm going to look at a little lower level standard. So let's say I'm going to look at 3 MBT1. I click apply, and I can see this standard requires an understanding of place value, multiplication, and numbers. And one thing that I did say is that we are standards aligned, but not a standards assessment. And the reason for that is because we want to break those standards down into their foundational skills. If we just test the standard, we don't know why they're struggling with that standard. So we really break it down and tell you, why are they struggling with that standard? What is holding them back? So for example, I can see here, this student, Jaden, is struggling with numbers. That's what's holding them back, as well as not having any concept of multiplication. I can also see if a student was ready to learn, they would appear here, or I can see if they've demonstrated mastery in this standard. So I can see, okay, they are ready for that more in-depth understanding, more of those word problems, real life application. They don't need scaffolding with skills before learning this standard. So it really breaks their students down and lets you know when you're teaching a whole class lesson, who's going to need scaffolding. Okay, I'm going to go back into the summary point. And I am going to look at the individual student reports. So I'm going to go ahead and click on reports for a student. So I'm going to click here. I recommend using the detail, and actually we have a progress report that will be coming back. But the detail report and the progress report are very similar. The detail report just has kind of some extra information in general about the assessment. So for now, I recommend using the detail report. But when the progress report comes back, I recommend using that. This is great for sharing with parents, giving them a real understanding of where their student is, and sharing it with students as well so that they know what are their next steps, where are they in each area. Go ahead and click on Run Report. You can download it as a PDF or view it. This up here, it kind of gives you an idea of how our summary scores are calculated. So we look at how many skills there are in each grade and how many skills that student has mastered. So the raw score is how many skills they have mastered. In numbers and operations, this student has mastered 20 skills. They're a third grade student, so we would expect them to have mastered between 23 and 41 skills. In measurement, they've mastered 14, which is appropriate for their grade level. Data analysis, they've actually mastered 15, which is above grade level for them. The green indicates at or above grade level. The red indicates below grade level. The student has mastered 73 skills, and that puts them at a grade level of 3.31. Let's get into the actual details of this report. So I can see the red indicates that the student is below grade level, that their score, this blue, shows their current level. That blue score is bold, it's below grade level. They're a third grade student. They're at 2.6. That shows me they are below grade level. However, their next step is 2.9, is just barely below grade level. So it's black. The two arrows indicate their next step. But if I scroll through and I can look here at comparing and ordering, their next step is red. That means that the next step that they need to learn is also a below grade level skill. As well, we indicate what are all the next steps. What does this student need? What's the scope and sequence of what they need to work on next? You can see over here under tested, you can see how they did on each section. So if it shows NT, that means that they were not tested in that section. A plus shows that they were tested and showed mastery, and a minus indicates that they were tested and did not show mastery. You can actually see for this student, they started here with counting by 1s, 2s, 3s, 5s, and 10s. They showed mastery on that. They moved up to text and numerals, showed mastery, moved on to counting by hundreds and thousands. They did not get that section. So this is their present level, and that's their next instructional level. Then I'm going to go ahead and go back to scores and reports, Active Pulse Math, and I can look at the other individual student reports. So the other really great report that I want to go into is the special education report. This is for writing IEPs, but it's actually great for goal setting for any student. So I'm going to go ahead and click there. And from here, I can see actually a student's present level in each area. So I can start looking at numbers and operations, but I can switch over to any of the other strands of mathematics. And so what this shows is where is the student working right now? What have they already mastered? For example, we were looking at comparing and ordering. The student is in third grade, but is working at a kindergarten level. They've kind of mastered the kindergarten level. What that does is that shows what standard they've mastered, and then what's the grade level standard that's related to that concept. So if you're writing an IEP, you're going to be looking for their lowest skill here. So for example, I might put comparing and ordering on their IEP, but putting that their goal is to reach this grade level standard. And I can go ahead and if I don't remember what that standard is, I can look it up. But I want to see that that's what they're working towards. But this is where they're at. As well, I want to see, okay, I want to make incremental goals. What are their next steps? What do they need to do to get to the next steps of comparing and ordering? Like we looked at this before in that instructional placement, I can do this for the individual student. So I click on instructional skills display. Let's say I want to look at the next 3 skills in each area. So I click on 3 and I hit refresh. And here I'm going to see, okay, what are the next steps? For comparing and ordering, the next step would be 2-digit numbers using the appropriate symbol. And that's a first grade skill. Then I want to look at their second grade skill, 3-digit numbers. Okay, that's what they're going to work on next. And then they'll get to comparing money amounts. And that is grade level. That will bring that student up to grade level. I can see for addition, the next steps are above grade level. So I wouldn't worry about that on an IEP. If they've used Edge, you would be able to see their Edge there for instructional minutes. So that's a really helpful report for goal setting for any student. So even if they don't have an IEP and you want to goal set with them, you could say, okay, you really need to work on comparing and ordering. We want to, this is what you need to do to get up to speed on that. Or if a student is advanced, you can even see that information. Okay, I'm going to go back to Active Pulse Math and just show a couple of things. So that's really the main reports that you're going to use for group, whole group reports, instructional placement, and the standards report right here, instructional placement, standards, and then for individual students, the detail, or when it comes back, progress report, and the special education report. But as well, you may need to see, okay, well, how did the student do before? I'm looking at their current scores, but I want to see, if these are accurate. Let's say these scores are way higher than I expected. You can actually go back and look at the test log and look at their previous scores. So that's what this arrow here is for, is the test log. And that lets you look at any previous assessments that they've taken. Or if you want to look at the particular test, they already had scores here, and you want to see what are the scores for each individual test, you can go ahead and click on the test log. Okay, so now your students have, this is for students who have assessed in ADAM. We do have this information also. It will work in for pre-algebra. But let's say you want to go into more detail in pre-algebra. You've got scores, maybe you have a mix of ADAM and DOMA scores in here, and you really, want to get an idea of things, you can use this. But let's say you tested your whole class in pre-algebra, and then DOMA pre-algebra, and you really want to focus on that. You can go ahead and click on pre-algebra. We have 2 tabs for that. We have the 1 through 5, that's the basic math skills, and then 6 through 14, which are your pre-algebra skills. So I'm going to go ahead and start here. And I have 2 students who have taken the pre-algebra assessment. I can go ahead and look at how they did in each section, kind of as an overview. Green scores here indicate that a student has mastered that section. Maybe they didn't get 100%, but they at least have a good concept. And so that actually counts towards their raw score as 1 point. So there's 14 possible points, and the highest score on pre-algebra is 14, and then the highest score in basic math skills is 5. Each green counts as 1 point towards those scores. Now, a yellow, that actually indicates that a student has partial mastery. So that counts as half a point towards their raw score. And then red means that they're really struggling in that area, and that counts as 0 points towards their raw score. Then I can look here into the pre-algebra 6 through 14, and I can see, okay, evaluating exponents. If you hover above here, you can see what concepts are covered in pre-algebra skills, and so I can see the student scores there. So that gives you a real general information. If you want to kind of look at students based on their skill, the particular skills, and you want to group students, you actually can use the instructional placement report. So you could go to exponents in the instructional placement under summary, and you could group students that way. But let's say we want to look in on the students' individual scores. So we come here to reports. We're going to go to detail. And what we're actually going to do, this student took pre-algebra, algebra, and ADAM. We're going to uncheck active pulse. We're going to uncheck algebra. we're only going to leave pre-algebra checked because we want to look at their pre-algebra specific scores. And this is how you get the pre-algebra report. So I'm going to click on Run Report. What I see is the general pre-algebra report. So I have, my legend, and I can see for each construct how they did. So green means mastery, yellow means partial mastery, and red means that they didn't master this section. So now I want to go into more detail though. So the first thing I see here under integer operations is 100% of mastery of this construct. This shows me, because there's no details in here, this shows me that the student actually answered the pre-screening question correctly. So if a student answers the pre-screening question correctly, they don't get the kind of detailed questions. And our pre-screening section is not multiple choice. They do have to enter the answer. So it allows us to see if they were able to use multiple concepts together to answer a question. But then in fractions, this student did not get mastery of the pre-screening questions, so they were given the individual questions, and those sections are multiple choice and adaptive. We go ahead, we can see, the pluses show that they got that concept, and the minuses show that they did not understand those concepts. We can, look through and see where the student is. They have a minus that does show that they were assessed. And then if they have this kind of circle with a line through it, that means that because of how they did in other sections, they were not given that section. So it may be that they did poorly in other sections, so they weren't given that, or it could mean that they did so well that it's assumed mastery. But that, circle with a line means that they were not tested in that section. So that's the basics for this pre-algebra report. This is good to share with students so you can pick particular concepts that they need to work on. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit back here. Now I'll go back to Active Pulse Math. I've shown you the pre-algebra scores. We've looked at summary. We've looked at the reports. So now let's say everyone's done with their assessments, set some goals, and now you want to enroll your students into Edge. So in order to do that, you're going to come here to Instruction, and you're going to click on Edge AP. First thing you're going to do is click on Enroll Edit. This is where you're going to enroll your students. So you want to make sure that they have a test here under Last Aligned. That will be, the alignment is aligning them to the questions that they got wrong, which ones, where their skill level is at. That's picking out the lessons that they need. So from there, what you're going to do is click on Enroll Class In and click on Enroll. And here you want to make sure that you're doing the alignment and you're enrolling them in math. We do have lesson sets for kindergarten that won't apply to you in secondary math. So go ahead and click on Enroll Math, and that will enroll the class into Edge. Any students who have finished an assessment, are not queued for another assessment, and are not already enrolled. This class has already been enrolled, so of course it doesn't say anyone's enrolled, but this kind of gives you that indicator as to why perhaps they may not have been enrolled if they weren't. When you scroll down, you'll then see the Edit button appear for students who have been enrolled. This student was enrolled with Adam, but if you have students that took both Adam and pre-algebra, I do recommend that actually you don't use the Enroll Class button. You enroll the students individually using the Enroll button. And then you can choose if you want their alignment to be to pre-algebra or to Adam. So if a student did really well in Adam and you want to align them to pre-algebra, you can go ahead and enroll them in the pre-algebra course. But if they didn't do well in pre-algebra and you want them to work on their basic math skills, you can go ahead and enroll them into the Adam course. From here, if you do need to make edits to the student course, you can do that here. I'll also show you another place where you can do it. I do highly recommend that you actually go in to edit for each student and you go ahead and remove the section challenges. That is an option. So you can click Remove Section Challenges. I click on that, you click Accept, and it'll remove them, and then you need to go ahead and save the changes. So once your students are enrolled, you're going to go ahead and want to monitor their progress. So that's going to take us here to current course usage. Under current course usage, this is how you're going to monitor your students as they're using their courses that are individual to them. So this only covers their individual to them courses. So you're going to go ahead and select your course. I'm going to click on Math Edge because that's what we're focusing on. And what I can see here is I can see my students' information. I can see how much time they've spent in the program. And then I can see the number of lessons to grade level. So this is how many of their lessons are below their grade level. For instance, if I have a student who is in 6th grade, any lessons that are kinder, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade level, that will show up in their number of lessons to grade level. Next, we have the number of average minutes per lesson. This counts every time they've worked on that lesson. So we don't want to see 40 minutes. That's typically too long. What we would expect to see for students working on kind of the lower level lessons, the lower grade level lessons, we might see a 5 to 15 minutes. For students working on higher grade level lessons, we probably would see something more along like 15 to 30 minutes per lesson. Then based on that information, how many lessons they have to grade level, how long they spend on each lesson, that gives an indication on how long they need to spend in the program to reach their grade level lessons. Next, we have number of lesson attempts. This is how many times a student has clicked on a lesson, clicked on it at all, whether they finished it or not, whether they worked 20 minutes on it, whether or not they worked 2 seconds on it. That will count here under number of lesson attempts. When this number is really high, that often indicates that a student is clicking out as soon as they get a question wrong. We don't want them doing that on the first try. It's fine if they are doing review. They can do that for review if they want to, try and get a gold medal. But you don't want to see this super high. Next, you have the number of total completed lessons. That's how many times they finished a lesson, whether they passed it or not. With this, if this number is really high, that will often indicate that a student is stuck on a lesson. So you want to be careful there. You want to keep an eye out. If this lesson is higher than the number of lessons that they've completed, you want to kind of peek in there and see if they're stuck. The number of unique completed lessons, that's how many different lessons they've worked on. So for example, if a student has worked on triangles, let's say they clicked on triangles 5 times, all of that will appear in number of lesson attempts. They finished it 3 times, that will appear here in number of total completed, but unique completed would only be 1 because that is one concept, one lesson that they have completed, no matter how many times they worked on it. So that's what this indicates. And then you can see their average scores. If their average scores are below 75%, I would definitely check in on them to make sure that they aren't stuck on a lesson. Then you can see their math course progression. If you click on that, you'll see every single time they've done anything with the lesson in order. But I actually recommend kind of checking out here under Edit, which takes us back to where we were looking before. You click on Math, and this shows you their course, and this allows you to see when they last played a lesson, how many times they played it, how long they played it for, and their score. This number is higher than, say, 3. Definitely look in on there. Click on that. This tells you how many times they played it. It tells you each time they worked on that lesson. And you want to kind of check out and see if they're stuck on that lesson. So you want to keep an eye here for stuck lessons. Now, let's say, your student is progressing along and you actually want to kind of check and see if they're meeting your goals. So we come back to Instruction Edge AP. Rankings is a great way to see if you have weekly goals. You can go ahead and click on Ranking, and you can show all your students, and you can see the most new lessons completed. So this will put how many new lessons the students completed in order. And that's the one that I recommend using for progress monitoring or for goal setting to make sure that students are progressing through their lesson path. As well, you can use the class map to see that they're earning their badges. So you can see which lessons that they have done. Here, I'm going to set this for Math Edge. So make sure that you have the right filters on. And I can see, okay, so this student has completed 1 lesson and they received silver. And I can see that for the whole class. Then I also want to point out the whiteboard. This allows you to go and look at the lessons. You can scroll down, get to math. You can look at all of the lessons. So let's say you want to share a lesson on probability basics. You could go ahead and click on that and share the whole lesson with the class. Or let's say you have a student who's stuck on a lesson and it's a concept in third grade, it's triangles, and you want to see, okay, what does that lesson look like? How can I help them? You could click on that and watch the triangles lesson and try it yourself. So that whiteboard feature is really helpful for sharing with the class or previewing lessons. Now let's say you actually are doing probability basics with your class and you want to assign a lesson to the whole class. You want everybody to work on probability basics before you teach your lesson. You can go ahead and go up to Instruction and Assignments. Click on Assignments and you can actually add an assignment for the class. So if I go ahead and add assignment, I'm going to create a blank. I could use a template if my school had templates already created by other teachers, or if I had created a template that I wanted to refer back to, I could do that. And you can create templates in the assignment library. But for right now, I'm just going to assign it to the whole class, and I'm just going to assign a single lesson, so I'm going to use create blank. Here, I usually title it after I've assigned the lesson. So I'm going to go ahead and select my activities for this lesson. I can select from Math Edge, Khan Academy, or any custom URL. I could put in any URL from an outside source. But I'm going to use Math Edge. I'm going to go ahead and click on Math Edge, and then I'm going to search. So I'm going to search for probability. Okay, so I see I've got my probability lessons, and I'm going to do probability basics. So I'm going to drop that lesson in here. Now, if I wanted to include 2 lessons, I just drag it over, and I do have to make sure that I put it in order. So I want to make sure that the lesson I want them to do first is number 1, and the lesson I want them to do second is number 2. Because they do have to do the first lesson before they move on to the second lesson. Then I can go ahead and select my class. I want to select my class, and then my students appear. I can add all my students at once, or I can go ahead and I can use Control to select just a few students and move them over. Then I'm going to go ahead and title it. So I might say beginning probability. And give instructions. Could be do your best. It could be something like something more inspirational than that, or it could be as simple as complete the lesson. And then I want to give them a due date. So let's say I want it done by Friday because I'm going to be teaching the lesson on Monday. So I will give that a due date, and then I'm going to go ahead and save that. The lessons that I've assigned will appear here in my assignments. So assignment library allows you to create a template. Basically, the template is the same thing. You create your lessons. You just don't assign it to any students, and you're not setting any due dates. Those could be shared just with yourself. You can share them with the school, or your admin could actually share them at a district level. That data, once a student has completed the lessons, under assignments, you can see student progress through that. You can see this lesson, 3 lessons were assigned. You can see if the students have viewed the lessons. However, if you want to see the scores, that's actually, you go under Instruction, Edge AP, that's actually under all Edge usage. So if I go ahead and click on that, I'm looking at math. I can select my date range. So let's say I want to see in the last 30 days. Usage log, this is where I would click to see all of their lessons, and lesson type would be assignments. So you can actually see here their Edge assignment usage, but it also includes their course usage. Okay, so that just about covers everything that you need to get going. I do recommend that once your students have done their assessments and, have started using Edge a little bit, that we go ahead and do a training specific to your grade level or your school. And so I recommend that you reach out to your principal or your district admin to arrange that. So I do want to thank everyone for coming to this training and for watching it if you're watching it after the fact. And you can reach out to us with questions at help@letsgolearn.com. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.